In 2014, 16-year-old me discovered what was soon to become a new personal favourite TV show of mine, Forever. This was a show centred around a New York-based pathologist called Dr. Henry Morgan, played by Ioan Gruffudd, kind of topically the original Reed Richards or Mr. Fantastic from 2005's Fantastic Four, who was secretly an over 200-year-old immortal. There are definitely similarities to Lost, as each episode consists of flashback scenes where we learn about Henry's past and life, learning about his first death during the slave trade, his wife, who he met during World War II, and his son Abe, who is the only person alive today who knows his secret. Or at least, so we think. Because newly introduced Detective Joe Martinez seems to be somewhat suspicious of Henry and his fascination and ability to work out the cause of death in police cases, requesting him as the medical examiner for all of her cases, which is where the show transpires with them working side by side, solving murder cases, and also in Henry's case, trying to understand the complexities of death and why it eludes him. But in a further plot twist, it's revealed that Henry is not the only immortal, as he has a stalker named Adam who claims, with good evidence, that he knows Henry's secret and that he's been living as an immortal for over 2,000 years, making Henry just a child to him. Throughout the show, Henry experiments with ideas of how he could potentially bring about his own final death. One of the more interesting ones I actually remember was that he thought if he found the weapon that killed him and shot himself with that weapon in the same place, that would kill him permanently, but he tries it and then ends up being reborn again, so it didn't work. And as the show went on, providing mystery after mystery about Henry's condition, and raising questions about what could be the thing that actually killed him, eventually, after 22 episodes of what I genuinely considered to be a really great show, it all climaxes with a season finale where Joe seemingly has finally uncovered Henry's secret. And then the show was cancelled. The fans of the show were just left with unanswered questions and a cliffhanger. And despite attempts to get the show picked up from fans online and the showrunners, it never did. The closest thing we ever got was an Australian TV show called Harrow, which came out a few years ago, also coincidentally starring Ioan Gruffudd as a pathologist. But I've never actually watched that. I just thought it was a funny coincidence while researching this video. Anyway, I bring this all up because I feel like most people will probably have a similar experience, most likely with something else, that they really enjoyed and felt like had loads of potential, only for it to be ripped away from them due to it not pulling in the level of viewers that ABC were looking to draw, primarily citing the fall in live viewer numbers from the premiere to the finale, but seemingly not taking into consideration at all how many people were recording it to watch later in the week, almost implying that people's viewing habits around 2014 were changing and it was becoming less common to watch TV shows live as it was becoming more and more accessible to watch things in their own time. Oh, how it might have been different if it had premiered 5 years later on a streaming service. And the point I'm trying to make is that when something like this happens and you're left feeling like something never got to reach its true potential, it actually creates a kind of strange, almost false narrative around a show like Forever, where it's almost now universally loved and regarded as a missed opportunity to be a truly great show by those who remember it. Which, if you compare that to some of the most successful shows in the world from around the same time, you know, like Game of Thrones or Yellowstone, that got to run for multiple seasons, growing their audiences, and now have these less liked seasons, and spin-off shows, and far more negative press around them than something like Forever ever would have, it raises the question for me, would it have actually been a bad thing for Forever to get renewed? Could it have become so popular that we could have watched this show become a massive franchise with sequels and prequels following other immortal stories in this universe, and actually ruin this entirely potential-driven reputation it now has? And more pressingly, why does every good thing seem to get ruined from being oversaturated with sequels and spin-offs today? Now, I expect you've clicked on this video probably with some sort of expectation that I'm going to rant about how there's no more room for originality as we've created a landscape where every piece of fictional media is now being meticulously designed so that sequels and spin-offs can be made from them before they've achieved an ounce of success. Because that is the narrative. A narrative I even somewhat participate in myself. I am no stranger to complaining about Pixar constantly hashing out sequel after sequel over the years. I mean, I was literally randomly ranting about the announcement of Coco 2 for about 2 minutes on my Blue Seamus channel the other day. But this is also a narrative I don't entirely agree with. there's still a lot of creative and original storytelling that can come from sequels, and some of, if not most of, my favourite movies to exist are part of a franchise. When done right, getting the chance to see your favourite characters get further developed and establishing deeper lore about them while extending their story can be a truly great thing. And I really don't think this is a particularly controversial or surprising statement to make today. I would go as far to argue the complete opposite, and that people actually like sequels today. There's a reason why most of us aren't actively boycotting everything that's part of a larger franchise. Matter of fact, we've kind of reached a point where we're doing the opposite, and that almost everything we are watching is part of a larger franchise. Ask someone their favorite Marvel movie, and you can get a wide variety of answers, and almost all of them are going to be a sequel to something or other, bar Iron Man, which I watched again the other day, and it really holds up, to be fair. Ask someone what their favorite animated movie is, and I found genuinely, more often than not, people name a sequel, whether that's Shrek 2 or Toy Story 3 or Across the Spider-Verse, all of which are valid takes. But I still remember, even maybe as recently as 15 years ago, sequels having a reputation for almost always being worse than the original, and that the existence of a sequel that was agreed to have improved upon the original were few and far between, maybe only reserved for the likes of The Godfather Part 2 and Empire Strikes Back, but I really don't think that belief is held today. And especially if we're going back as far as the 70s, sequels almost never outperform their original movies at the box office. Even those two that I just listed that are considered to be classics today failed to outgross their originals at the box office. And when you look at the most successful movies at the box office from 50 years ago, they are almost entirely original. But compare that with the most successful movies of the 2020s, almost all of them are part of a pre-existing franchise. And to find one that's completely original, and by that I mean not based on any previous work, is almost impossible. Like, genuinely, just have a quick look at the list. Avatar: The Way of Water, sequel to Avatar. Ne Zha 2. The 2 implies it's a sequel to Ne Zha 1. Spider-Man No Way Home is the third installment in the third Spider-Man trilogy, a sequel. Inside Out 2, a sequel to Inside Out 1. Top Gun Maverick, sequel to Top Gun. Barbie is the first movie that's not a sequel, but it also just so happens that this first movie that's original is based off arguably the most famous toy franchise in the world that grosses over $1 billion in sales a year, according to Statista. And even with that said, while it's technically the first live-action Barbie movie, it has 41 animated Barbie movie predecessors alongside multiple animated TV shows, shorts, web series, and following the success has spawned further plans for sequels and TV shows of its own. So excuse me if I'm speaking out of line here, but I don't think I can rule out the Barbie movie as being part of a larger franchise. Which brings me back to the list. Oh, did you forget about the list? No, we're still going. The Super Mario Bros. Movie. I'm not doing this. Just refer to what I just said about Barbie if you want to know why that's part of a franchise. Deadpool and Wolverine serves as a sequel to about 40 different movies from 3 separate Marvel Universe franchises. Moana 2. It's got a 2. It's a sequel. Lilo and Stitch sees a live-action remake coming before an original movie. Jurassic World Dominion is about the 10th movie about dinosaur theme parks. Despicable Me 4, the 6th movie in the Despicable Me franchise. And then finally, we have Oppenheimer, which is technically based on a book that's based on a true story, so it isn't even truly a fictional creation. But hey, it's good to know that all it took was arguably the most famous director in the world collaborating with 10 of the most famous actors in the world for a Best Picture-winning feature film that also kind of lucked out into having the most organic, best marketing campaign for a movie in the modern era of cinema, in the Barbenheimer craze, to be the 13th most successful movie of this decade, which we are only halfway through. And as I've kind of touched on, this goes so much deeper than just movies. I had a quick look at the West End right now. I don't know if the same applies to Broadway, but there's barely a single show running right now that isn't part of an original IP. The Lion King, Hercules, Wicked, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, The Devil Wears Prada, Moulin Rouge, Back to the Future, Matilda, Stranger Things, The First Shadow, Come Alive, The Greatest Showman, Circus Spectacular, to name a few. And I think it's such a great mirror of the culture that every online creator who has a tiny amount of success immediately turns their attentions to making a podcast and starting up new channels to further branch out their audience. Like, some people out here are making color-coded channels, hoping that you're going to subscribe to them in your own free time and watch more of them. And yeah, if you would actually subscribe to my other channels, that would actually mean a lot. This isn't a joke anymore. I was just doing a bit. Isn't that weird? I'm doing a video about franchises, but I, myself, am the biggest franchise of all. Anyway, back to the video, because don't even get me started on TV. I mean, Disney Plus's whole brand since they came about has pretty much just been, we own all the big franchises. You need to be subscribed so you can watch all your favorite TV shows from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars and the stuff you didn't really want TV shows from, but we're doing them. However, weirdly, other streaming services have kind of followed suit. Look at Netflix, who used to be making all these popular original series less than 10 years ago, and I'm sure they still are, but what I mainly see from them now is like, oh, they've just rebooted the Avatar franchise. There's a One Piece live-action adaptation. Even the Wednesday TV show revolving around Wednesday from the Addams Family franchise, for example. Or probably more notably, HBO Max is just making DC shows, Game of Thrones spin-offs, and the creme de la creme, a Harry Potter TV series reboot for a literally like only a decade after the Harry Potter movies, which are beloved by all, basically, finished. And get this, after years and years of delays, HBO Max is still not available in the UK, where Harry Potter takes place. But that isn't a problem for the people watching this video, because this video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Now, if you don't know what a VPN is, it's basically an online tool that gives you the ability to digitally change your location while using the internet, disguising you as being somewhere else in the world. And beyond the novelty of virtually traveling, this actually has real practical applications which can get you around geo-restricted content that might not be available in your country. Something that's especially prevalent right now with all the sorts of legislations and restrictions coming in over what websites you can use and can't use all over the world. Specifically for me, right now, and the point I'm making for this video, it means that when I go on to Netflix or Disney Plus, I can find all sorts of content on the American, Australian, or Japanese ones that aren't available in the UK. And you can use my code SeamusGorman, SeamusGorman, for 4 months extra when you sign up. Oh, and they also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there is literally no risk to try it out for yourself. The link is in the description down below. Checking it out would help out the channel a lot. Anyway, sorry. I've got a little bit off topic there, but I don't think it takes an analytical genius to work out why everything I've been saying is happening. Sequels are far easier to put together for the big companies making them. They're taking characters and worlds that have already been thought of, with already established lore as a way to profit off an already existing fandom. It's low risk, and also high reward. You can almost understand why they don't want to put funding into original stories, but for some reason, every time I see this conversation, what I consider to be quite lazy talking points always come up, where people basically conclude that no one's making good originals anymore, when I actually think the reality is that, for one, we've just made it so easy for sequels to do well that it's actually causing the originals to fail. Like, there's a reason why Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness made 7 times the amount of money at the box office than Everything Everywhere All at Once did 3 years ago, despite the latter being a significantly better movie, in my opinion. And also in the opinions of every person I've spoken to about this, fans, critics, and the Academy. But also now, when an original story manages to beat the odds and break through into the mainstream, it inevitably just becomes a franchise. You know, for example, let's talk about what I consider to be one of the most interesting examples of a piece of media exceeding expectations for its impact and viewership in potentially, maybe ever, in Squid Game. With its relatively modest budget of $21.4 million for the first season, which, for context, I think is like relatively expensive in the grand scheme of a Korean show, but compare this to something like Stranger Things Season 4, which was being produced by Netflix at the same time. They were spending more money on that show per episode than the entirety of Squid Game's first season. And this isn't particularly surprising. I mean, this was a show being made in the language of a country of just over 50 million people. So I assume the anticipation was kind of like, if it does well in South Korea, it could get a season 2. And we'll just leave a little tease for a season 2 in there in case. Little did they know, this was about to become a global phenomenon, and within a month, it was the most watched show of all time on Netflix, leaving Netflix with the most popular show in the world, and therefore in their eyes, a cash cow to make money from. And less than 4 years later, we are staring down the barrel of the gun of the Squid Games franchise. The original show has just finished its 3rd season, with viewership declining every season. There's a reality show based on the games, and a rumoured American Squid Games spin-off show. And here's the thing. As someone who genuinely really enjoyed Squid Game, nothing about this show warranted a season 2 in my opinion, let alone all this. I'm gonna try not to go too in depth and spoil it, but the natural comparison that was made when it came out was to the Hunger Games. And to tangent off again, I also remember reading the first Hunger Games book around when the first movie came out, probably when I was like 14, and while I'm sure I didn't even remotely pick up on the metaphors and underlying messages from it at the time, my immediate thought was, how can you make a sequel from something like this? But yet again, they've made many more, with more coming. My reason for thinking this is because they've titled these two things around the games, and they've built the story around the lead character being drafted in to play this annual game where they have to kill people for sport, and lo and behold, they won. But now you're making a second one, so what do you do? Obviously, within the universe, the games would be going ahead again next year, but the main character would have no reason to get involved next time. And that's where, funnily enough, both of them made the exact same choice, and maybe the only choice they could have made in this situation, to find a way to get their main character back in the game. I personally prefer the way Hunger Games went about it because it just makes sense in that universe where the Hunger Games is sort of like a reality show for the rich elites, and it's a common trope with reality shows to do kind of like an all-star season, and I think they fit it in with the lore of the universe, establishing that every 25 years they do this ramped up sort of extra special games, and it was specifically stated in the first book that it had been the 74th annual Hunger Games, so it would have been the 75th one. And while I still believe the Hunger Games could have made for a great solo novel, they really didn't need to become a franchise. I'll admit, they kind of proved me wrong, because I genuinely think Catching Fire is the best one, and it set the template for how to do it, which Squid Game followed suit. And in their case, they had Ji-yeon returning to the games through the guise that he was going to take it down from the inside. And I thought it was fine. But it's really when you get to the 3rd year in these kinds of things that I start to have a problem with it. You're kind of outstaying your welcome here, and I don't think the vision was for it to ever go on this long. And the stories start transpiring into kind of, we've got to take down the institutions putting on these games, and like the 3rd Hunger Games, there isn't even a Hunger Games in it, making it just by far the weakest installment of that franchise for me personally. However, fictional things going on too long isn't an uncommon problem. I've seen many famous series struggle with this exact thing before. Like, for example, Prison Break. At the start of season 2, now they've all broken out of the prison. What are you meant to do? I guess we just kind of show them getting on with their lives outside of prison. That's actually what happens if you've ever watched Prison Break before. And, by the time they're intentionally getting themselves thrown into prison just so they can break out for like the 3rd time, it just completely had me wondering, what's the point of this? And I also think Lost kind of has the same thing here. I have a friend, Brett Swartz, who's gonna kill me for saying this, but while it's genuinely one of my favorite shows of all time, there's like a whole season where they're already off the island and they're spending the season trying to get back onto the island. I'm just like, what's this even about anymore? And that's kind of its own whole can of worms, but it's a good metaphor for this sort of suffering from success analogy, where with the more and more consumerist the entertainment world that's been built is becoming, where do we draw this imaginary line to decide what deserves to be a franchise and what doesn't? Because technically, nothing deserves a sequel or a larger franchise more than anything else, at least literally. But if you take two movies where one teases something, even has an end credits scene leaving unanswered questions that need resolving versus something that's completely self-contained within itself, there's no question about which one people are going to say warrants a sequel. Coco, obviously. Okay, I just need to get this out of my system. I'm not joking here. I found an article from 2018 where the then CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, said, "Not every great movie we make becomes a franchise," where he specifically pointed at Coco, saying it isn't necessarily a franchise. And I just love the beautiful irony to it all. Coco, their shining example of an original film that isn't part of a larger franchise. Lo and behold, 7 years on, and following a reshuffle where Bob Iger left and then came back to be Disney's CEO, Coco 2 has officially been announced to be in the works, meaning the Coco franchise has officially been created. Something that there was no fan demand for because, spoilers, it's almost been 10 years at this point, but Coco concludes with Mama Coco dying to create a bittersweet reunion with her estranged father, completing Miguel's mission to bring his family back together as a perfectly well-rounded story. Also, this is a bit of random lore that probably only I know, but did you guys know that the director of Coco, Lee Unkrich, retired in 2019? He worked for Pixar for 25 years, with Coco being his sole directorial original film, but he's apparently coming out of retirement to work on Coco 2. And my point is, if we go back to this imaginary line of what deserves a sequel and what doesn't, this is so far down the doesn't need a sequel side, I can't even fathom what kind of idea they can possibly be cooking up for a sequel. And this is the problem. Films like this that don't tease any sort of follow-up are actually becoming really rare today. I feel like I'm kind of beating this point over the head, but almost every movie now is gonna tease something, you know? Just in case. End credit scenes have gone from being a gag or potentially bloopers at the end of the movie to literally being essential viewing involving key plot points around the futures of the characters' narratives. I remember in 2018, a lot of people went to see Ant-Man and the Wasp just because they wanted to see if it would have some sort of end credit scene tying it into Avengers Infinity War or an Endgame, and I mean, it did. It's the only scene from the film I can really remember, which is kind of everything wrong here. I'm not trying to assign blame to Marvel for all of this, but they kind of are the franchise here. We've seen the reputation of sequels and franchise movies change in real time as the MCU went from being this one successful movie with Iron Man in 2008 making almost $600 million to just over 10 years and 20 movies later, Avengers Endgame almost making $3 billion and becoming the highest grossing movie of all time at the time. And people complain about the MCU. There are too many movies and TV shows to keep up with. Superhero fatigue is definitely the term that gets thrown around a lot, but I don't think there's this outrage when they announce a new slate of movies and it's entirely consisting of sequels, as there is when other studios do the same thing. And whether that's because it's just the nature of superhero stories that they're always continuing and they're never really finished, the ripple effect of this is still there to see. Now we have animated movies concluding with end credits scenes, teasing sequels. Before this, DC were barely making a movie a year, and had Christopher Nolan, who I'm somehow mentioning for the second time in this video, making just the most unrecognizable and serious, but brilliant superhero movies you've ever seen. They've since set up about 4 different cinematic universes, and now, since sequels have become so normalized to us, even when something gets made with clearly no intentions for sequels or spin-offs, someone's still going to find a way to inevitably spin it off or reboot it or somehow shoehorn a sequel in there. And I've just been singling out Coco a lot over this, but I mean, who was out there asking for sequels to Freaky Friday or The Social Network or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? These are all movies that are planned to come out or have just been released at the time of recording this video. When I started making this video, I was hoping for it to serve as a sort of introspective of how everyone's collective viewing habits and what we consume has changed over the years, and how this is impacting the kind of things that end up being released. Forever, my favourite TV show of 2014, failed because, in my opinion, it was almost ahead of its time. A perfect bingeable series for streaming that didn't suit the setup of the week-to-week releases of cable television. And that more easy, comfort viewing sort of style that we've adapted to means that people are more interested to just go back to a universe they've already visited. And the most notable shift today is that because of how sequels are outperforming originals in terms of viewership and revenue, almost everything that comes out is now landing on the "this deserves a sequel or larger franchise" side of the imaginary line, because they're being designed to have room for more. And, well, this isn't entirely a bad thing because there's still interesting stories to be told, and sequels also provide a way to tell potentially more complex stories with longer, drawn-out narratives that require more time to pay off. Not everything needs a follow-up. Some things are better untouched, and the precedent being set is actually concerning because it truly has an opportunity to eradicate the existence of classic standalone stories that have laid the groundwork for this current entertainment world. And yeah, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And also, you may have noticed I kind of dropped a hint or two there that I have a new channel. What is Blue Seamus, you may be wondering? Well, it's a channel where I just kind of sit down and ramble about movies. I actually posted one of the Blue Seamus videos to the main channel to see what people thought about it. My Elio video, if you watched it like a month ago, that was actually a Blue Seamus video. I just posted it onto the main channel to see what people would say. And yeah, people liked it. They didn't even realize it was any different. So if you just want more of me talking about movies, that's kind of the place to go. I'm trying to do this like video essay thing here, like more time consuming, like writing these long scripts and sitting down and filming these slightly longer videos. And I want a space for that, but I want also a space to just kind of sit down and give my opinions. I think like making videos on this channel has become really hard for me in a weird way, where I'm trying to just like make everything perfect, and I know it doesn't need to be, and I've proven that by the fact I uploaded a Blue Seamus video onto this channel the other day. But I just want to have a space where I can just sit down, record a video in like an hour, just sit down, just write, don't even think about it, and then put it out into the world. And that's kind of what that channel is going to be there for. I feel like if you enjoyed this video and you like me, that's going to be a channel for you. So then if you want to check that out, please do. And as always, I just want to extend a special thank you to my patrons, especially those in the shout out tier: Kayla AC, Jacob, Maggie, Jonathan, Ben, Cameron, and Will. If you want to check out my Patreon, you can. Link in the description down below. And yeah, thanks so much for watching this. Blue Seamus, yeah, you can check that out. It's click here to subscribe, and also subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And yeah, cool. See ya.